she loves you, and you know you should be glad.
The Ed Sullivan Show gave us some of the most legendary TV moments of all time, but not every act hit the right note, or notes. From shocking rebellions to career-threatening flops, these are the worst Sullivan performances you never forgot. Well, if you saw it. The Mamas and the Papas, rebellious yet awkward, 1967. Now, most of us remember the Mamas and the Papas for those golden, unbeatable harmonies. California Dreamin', Monday, Monday, music that felt like pure sunshine. But when they hit the Ed Sullivan Show in 1967, the magic just wasn't there. No, seriously, just check it out. You can see it plain as day. The energy around the entire thing was just off, I guess. From what I've read, nobody agrees what the heck was up with the bananas. So instead of blending into Sullivan's polished Sunday night world, they came across as half rebellious, half bored. Now, some folks love the unapologetic weirdness of it all, when quirky really made you stand out. But I think more viewers were just left scratching their heads, myself included, I gotta admit. Was it cool irony? Was it nerves? Or were they reaching for whatever would make them memorable, no matter how wacky it was? I just don't think any of it landed, and it looked flat out awkward next to the usual brilliance. Maybe even more egregious than the colorful explosion of confusion was the blatant lip singing. And I know, everyone does it, that's a fair point, but this time it just felt especially obvious, I think. I always think it's kinda wild when a group that defined an entire era of cool California sound could look so out of place, but that's exactly what happened on Sullivan's big stage. Buddy Holly and the Crickets, Sabotage Showdown, 1958.
You don't know what you've been missing, oh boy, when you're with me, oh boy.
If you grew up in the 50s, you remember the first time you heard Buddy Holly and the Crickets. Those jangly guitars, that hiccup in his voice. Songs like That'll Be the Day and Oh Boy, they were electric. And when it came to the Ed Sullivan Show in January of 1958, you'd think it would have been another triumphant night. But Ed wasn't crazy about their rowdy rock and roll, and he asked them to swap out Oh Boy for something tamer. Buddy, being Buddy, told him no. He'd already promised his friends he was gonna sing it. And, well, yeah, that's when things began to sour. During the rehearsals, Sullivan called for the group, but only Buddy showed up. Ed, already annoyed, cracked that the Crickets didn't seem very excited to be there. Quick as a whip, Buddy shot back, I hope they're more excited than I am.
Tonight there'll be no hesitating, oh boy, when you're with me, oh boy.
Except with a bit more colorful language sprinkled in, if you can imagine. Well, that one line was enough to set Sullivan off. Oh, the gloves came right off. It was time for a grudge match between America's most famous TV host and one of rock and roll's rising stars. So, when Buddy and the Crickets went on that night, Sullivan messed up Buddy's last name on purpose as Hollard and Holland.
Oh boy, with Buddy Holland and his Crickets.
And then the microphones were turned down so low, the audiences at home could barely hear them. It really was television sabotage, plain and simple. But here's the kicker. Buddy Holly still tore into Oh Boy like he owned the stage. To me, that's what makes that performance truly unforgettable and truly rock and roll. Even while under Ed's thumb, Buddy showed America what rock and roll was, that it couldn't be silenced. Not by sharp jabs, not by a volume knob, and not even by Ed Sullivan himself. The Beach Boys, Psychedelic Reinvention, 1968. When you think of the Beach Boys, most of us go right back to those carefree surf tunes. I Get Around, Surfin' USA. Songs that made you want to grab a board even if the closest thing you had to an ocean was the community pool. In their first Sullivan appearance in 1964, it was just that. Clean-cut California kids in striped shirts, singing about cars and waves. It was perfect. But by 1968, things had changed. Not just for the band, but for music itself.
I wish they all could be California girls.
Psychedelia was in full bloom. The Beatles had gone wild with Sgt. Pepper's, and the Beach Boys weren't the same sunny surfers anymore. When they returned to Ed Sullivan's stage that year, the difference was almost jarring. Out the window went the striped shirts, in came the kaleidoscopic colors, trippy visuals, and a performance of good vibrations that leaned hard into the psychedelia era. They even played around with early green screen effects, something more at home on a late night art experiment than Sunday night variety TV back in the 60s.
I'm picking up vibration. She's giving me the excitation.
For fans who tuned in expecting the fun-loving Surf Boys of 4 years prior, it was almost like watching a different band altogether. Now, of course, the music was awesome. Good Vibrations is one of the most ambitious pop songs ever put on wax. But in that setting, on that stage, at that time, you could almost hear Middle America saying, "What happened to my Beach Boys?" It's just one of those moments where a band was too far ahead of its own audience, and instead of a victory lap on Ed Sullivan, it left a lot of folks mourning the end of an era. And looking back, it's honestly fascinating, the sound of the 60s changing right before our ears. Tiny Tim and Miss Vicki, 1970. If you were watching TV and listening to music in the late 60s, you couldn't escape Tiny Tim, with that ukulele and that falsetto voice singing Tiptoe Through the Tulips. He became one of the strangest pop stars of the era, or any era. And when he married Miss Vicki live on The Tonight Show in 1969, it was one of the most watched TV moments of all time. So, naturally, Ed Sullivan wanted a piece of that oddball magic, booking the newlyweds to sing together on his show in January of 1970. The setlist was a mix of old-fashioned ditties, The Fountain in the Park, You Are the Rose of My Heart, and Where Have You Been Hiding? Instead of pop or rock or folk, the pair leaned into vaudeville-style numbers that left some viewers charmed and some scratching their heads, usually the younger ones.
Why? 'Cause I love you. Why? 'Cause you love me.
Miss Vicki, barely 18, looked shy and uncertain next to Tiny Tim's theatrical flourishes. And the whole performance had this off-kilter energy, like a novelty act stretched way beyond its limits. Now, for some, it was campy fun, but for many, many others, it was just plain awkward. Because the chemistry wasn't there. And the audience wasn't sure how to react. The honeymoon glow didn't translate into primetime entertainment. Looking back, it's one of those Sullivan moments where you remember thinking, what exactly did I just see? It wasn't career-ending for Tiny Tim. His eccentricity was already his brand, but it sure wasn't the kind of act that left people begging for more. Elvis Presley, Waist Up, 1956. Now here's one I guarantee you'll remember, Elvis Presley's first Ed Sullivan Show. The king was already causing a stir with those swiveling hips of his, and parents across America were in a panic. You had ministers calling him indecent, newspapers saying he was corrupting the youth. And you were probably thinking, man, this guy is so cool. So when he finally hit Sullivan's stage in '56, the network got so nervous they wanted Presley filmed only from the waist up, no hips allowed. This also meant Ed had to play a very careful game. Keep it clean and leave out what made everyone drawn to Elvis like magnets. Or you defied the higher-ups for a truly unique guest performance. Well, it was 1956, and everyone opted to play it safe that night, and it had a big effect. It was the strangest thing. You could hear that voice, see the charm in his eyes, but there was always that nervous energy and anticipation from the scandal of, well, everything. All while knowing stuff was being hidden from us, censorship. Instead of the full Elvis experience, folks at home got this stiff little TV box that cut him off at the belt. Now, I'm sure some people thought it was the cleaner, safer choice. But honestly, I'm pretty sure more people just fell in love with him and the entire him, with the mystique of it all more. You can't really cage that kind of energy, even on live TV. You know how this plays out. All the controversy only makes him bigger. Looking back, it's kind of funny. Ed Sullivan and co. thought they were protecting the audience, but they just added fuel to the fire. By the next day, every diner jukebox was blaring Hound Dog and Don't Be Cruel. Elvis turned censorship into a victory, proving once and for all why he was the king of rock and roll. The Beatles debut critiques as a musical catastrophe, 1964.
She loves you, and you know you should be glad.
If you were around in February of '64, you remember where you were when the Beatles hit Ed Sullivan's stage. Maybe you were one of the 73 million people who tuned in. I mean, the whole country just stopped. For kids, it was thrilling. Those mop tops shaking as they sang All My Loving, She Loves You, and I Wanna Hold Your Hand. But here's the funny part, the confusing part. Not everybody saw it that way. Some critics, yes, music critics, came out swinging, calling the performance a musical catastrophe. Can you believe that? Some people said the fangirls screaming were louder than the band, and plenty of adults said they were just a fad. The Beatles were kinda stuck in this exciting, bewildering limbo. I know, yeah, some people said it wasn't their cup of tea. But for the younger generation, those so-called flaws were exactly what made it exciting. The raw energy, the joy, it wasn't supposed to sound like polished Sinatra. It was supposed to feel alive. And although we didn't know it at the time, or to the extent of it at the time, we were witnessing history. Looking back now, the skeptics and critics couldn't have been more wrong. That big, scary mystery ended up being one of the most important TV moments of all time, maybe the most important live concert of all time, launching the British invasion and changing pop culture overnight. To me, that's part of the charm. The Beatles weren't trying to be perfect, they were trying to be themselves, and that's exactly what made them unforgettable. Andy Griffith, nervous, rushed, what it was football routine, 1954.
And before he was 54 years old, he had killed 6 wives.
When you think of Andy Griffith, you picture Sheriff Andy Taylor, calm as can be on that front porch in Mayberry. Oh God, what I wouldn't give to step into Mayberry. But back in 1954, he was just a young comic from North Carolina trying to find his footing. But when Andy walked out on that stage, Ed Sullivan's stage for the first time, the magic just really wasn't there. He was nervous, he was stiff, and worst of all, nobody laughed, not one. The silence in the room was brutal. For a young performer hoping to win over America, it was about the worst feeling you could imagine. Sullivan himself quickly decided Andy wasn't ready for the spotlight and asked to cancel the other 3 appearances. And get this, Andy was actually happy that Sullivan let him off the hook. Now years later, Andy admitted, quote, "I don't really remember the appearance. All I remember is I walked out and I never got a laugh, not one." Some folks watching at home probably wondered if the young man was cut out for television at all. Of course we know how the story ends. Andy shook off that stubble, joined the big league in No Time for Sergeants, and eventually gave us one of the most beloved shows in TV history. But it's wild to think that if you only saw him on Sullivan that night, you would have never guessed he would have grown into the Andy Griffith we all came to love. Bob Dylan refused to perform after censorship, 1963.
Walls for the times they are a-changing.
Now, Bob Dylan wasn't the Dylan we think of today back in 1963. He was still that scrappy Greenwich Village folk singer, trying to break into the mainstream, and getting a slot on the Ed Sullivan Show, that was a dream ticket. He planned to perform Talkin' John Birch Paranoid Blues, a very cheeky little tune poking fun at Cold War paranoia, and people seeing communists under every rock. But the censors at CBS took one listen and gave a big, resounding no. During dress rehearsal, they told Dylan he'd have to pick another song, or change the lines. And here's where Dylan showed that famous stubborn streak. Instead of bowing to the biggest TV stage in the country, he shrugged, said no thanks, and walked out. It's honestly incredible. Just like that, millions of people expecting to see him got nothing at all. Can you imagine? For most young singers, that kind of opportunity, it really was everything. But Dylan wasn't about to let anyone tell him what he could or couldn't sing.
She said she would always stay.
When the Ed Sullivan Show's Bob Precht pled their case, Bob Dylan's response was, quote, "No, this is what I want to do. If I can't play my song, I'd rather not appear on the show." And he made good on that promise. At the time, I'm sure many people who worked on the Ed Sullivan Show thought it was career suicide. Sullivan's show could obviously put you on the map, but in the long run, it actually built Dylan's legend. The move ignited a media firestorm. There was no getting away from this news. And Ed Sullivan himself apparently went on record to reject the idea of changing the song. Now, that's quite the endorsement and a big bout of free publicity. By this point, Dylan wasn't just another folk singer. He was a voice willing to stand up for what he believed in, even if it meant losing the biggest stage in America. Looking back, that non-performance might have told us more about Dylan than any song he could have sung that night. Sam Cooke cut off mid-performance of You Send 1957.
Up and back, oh man, there ain't nothing like twisting the night away.
Sam Cooke had one of those voices that could melt you, smooth as silk, every note dripping with soul. By 1957, You Send Me was the song on everybody's lips, the tune that turned him from gospel singer into pop star. So, when he got the chance to perform on the Ed Sullivan Show, it should have been a dream moment, the kind of TV spot that sealed your place in history. But instead, it turned into one of the most frustrating flops of his career. Cooke went out there, charming as ever, and started into You Send Me, and the crowd was with him. But right in the middle of his performance, Sullivan cut him off. Just flat out pulled the plug. Pretty sure cause the show was running out of time though. But imagine being at home, waiting for the big note, and suddenly it's gone. Bye Sam, bye Ed. The audience in the theater booed. Cooke was humiliated, and fans at home never got the payoff.
Thrill me, honest.
Imagine being any artist getting a chance at the esteemed national stage and not getting your full due. But to Ed Sullivan's credit, I'm pretty sure he rebooked Sam later to make up for the blunder. But I mean, the damage was done. It was kinda humiliating. For a singer trying to prove himself outside the world of gospel, losing your spotlight like that, it was crushing. One of the greatest voices of all time cut short. Yeah, that's the kind of thing you never forget, and something that definitely makes this list. Bo Diddley ignored Ed's orders, 1955.
That rabbit I can't take. Keep it, I take the rain.
Bo Diddley was one of the true pioneers of rock and roll, but his one night on the Ed Sullivan Show in November of '55, it didn't exactly go the way Ed had planned. Sullivan had asked him to sing Tennessee Ernie Ford's hit, 16 Tons. My guess figuring it would sit better with the Sunday night audience. Bo agreed during rehearsals, but once the camera started rolling, he broke into his own namesake song, Bo Diddley. Because, well, he wanted America to see what he was all about. And the performance? Fantastic. That pounding rhythm, the smooth delivery, it was textbook charisma, confidence, and talent. Unfortunately, Sullivan was furious. He felt Bo had gone back on his word, and the exchange backstage got heated. I'm pretty sure Sullivan said some very inappropriate things. Because the result, Bo Diddley never invited back to the show. And for a young artist trying to break through, losing that platform was a serious blow. Still, it's a moment that shows exactly who Bo Diddley was, an innovator who wouldn't compromise his music just to play it safe. Even though it cost him Sullivan, that decision only reinforced his reputation as one of rock's true originals. And looking back, it's hard not to admire the nerve it took to stand firm in front of the most powerful man in television. Mitzi McCall and Charlie Brill bombed skit the night of the Beatles' debut, 1964.
These glasses? Why, I think you're the ugliest girl I've ever seen in my life, sweetheart. Get out!
If you tuned in the night the Beatles made their US debut on the Ed Sullivan Show in February of '64, you probably don't even remember the act that came on right before them. And for good reason. That unlucky slot went to a comedy duo, Mitzi McCall and Charlie Brill. They had a quirky sketch all ready to go, but the second they walked out, you could kind of feel it. They were there for the mysterious, thrilling British newcomers, John, Paul, George, and Ringo. The poor duo tried their best, but with 73 million people anxiously waiting for the Fab Four, their jokes landed with a thud.
Waiting outside, you know, she used to be one of the Beatles.
Well, what happened?
Somebody stepped on her.
Ringo wasn't even there to play a da-dum-tsh. McCall labeled the entire ordeal a nightmare and just wanted everything to end as soon as possible. Looking back, it's actually pretty cruel that anyone had to follow or precede the Beatles that night. McCall and Burrow went on to have steady careers in TV and comedy, but in that moment, they became a trivia footnote. The act America forgot because they had the misfortune of standing in the Beatles' shadow. Hey, it's a lesson in comedy. Sometimes timing really is everything. The Rolling Stones, Lyric Change, 1967.
Maybe then I'll fade away and not have to face the facts.
Now you can't talk about rebellious rock on the Ed Sullivan Show without bringing up the Rolling Stones. By 1967, they were already the bad boys to the Beatles' good boys. And their new hit, Let's Spend the Night Together, had parents clutching their pearls. And Ed Sullivan, well, he knew his Sunday night crowd, and he wasn't about to let Mick Jagger sing something that sounded so forward. The order came down, changed the lyric to Let's Spend Some Time Together. So there they were, live on national TV, and sure enough, Jagger went along with it. But not without sharing front and center how he actually felt about it. If you watch the tape, you can see him roll his eyes, exaggerate the new line, practically having a little musical temper tantrum. The whole thing felt really awkward, like a band that didn't really belong in that buttoned-up living room setting. For a group built on charisma and danger, it was almost comical. Of course the Stones weren't hurt by it. If anything, the censorship made the song even more famous. But in the moment, it was a watered-down performance that showed just how out of step Sullivan's world was with rock and roll youth. I still laugh when I see Mick trying to play nice while making it crystal clear he wasn't buying the charade. And there you have it, proof that even on one of television's biggest stages, the wheels could come off in spectacular fashion. Some of these performances hurt careers, others turned into legends, and a few are still debated to this day. So, now's the part where Do You Remember comes in. Do you actually remember watching any of these live the night they aired? Do you think some weren't bad at all? Did I forget a famously bad or shocking performance from the Ed Sullivan Show? Well, get down in the comments section and tell me which one. Tell me your favorites. Tell me which you watched. If you enjoyed the video, please hit that little thumbs up icon. It really helps our channel a ton. Make sure you subscribe. Hit that little bell so you never miss a trip back in time. Well, until next time, I'm Nostalgic Nick with Do You Remember, signing off. Waist up. Just like Elvis, I'm just like Elvis.